Lovely. Hello, we are live and we are back for another dangerous dialogue this week, talking about sex. Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk
Let's
about.
talk about you and me.
If we stop there, again, I don't think we need to pay the rights on it. I think that might be less than the 8 seconds, which is grand news for us. Hopefully, we'll talk about things that last 8 seconds and things that last many more seconds tonight, because sex is our topic and we're here to try and destigmatize it as much as we can. So if you've clicked on this video expecting something else, it's not what you think it is. We are about to have a conversation about sex for the next hour. We want you to get involved, so you can comment along on the YouTube, or you can go and have your own conversation about sex. We strongly encourage it. These wonderful people who are joining me today to talk about sex are going to introduce themselves. They're very excited, as am I. So I'm going to throw us straight over to Zoe. Off you go. Who are you? Where are you from? And how are you managing in the storm?
Hi, I'm Zoe. I've been here for a few weeks now. Sorry. I'm fine. The storm's not been too bad for me personally. I can't say the same for other people. I've seen some of the videos of trees falling down and snow being blasted around the place, but no, I'm great. Also, I'm from Aberdeen. I forgot you asked that too.
Amazing, lovely. Henriette, over to you.
Yeah, hi, my name is Henrietta and I am an actor writer. I feel like I'm coping quite well with the storm. Today I've just been sat inside all day in my bed. That has worked wonders. What else was it that I was supposed to say?
I think you kind of covered it there. That was good. Yeah. I love a bed day. Bed days are good.
Sunday.
Yeah. How about you, Doug? Tell us all about you.
Hi, I am King Shit of Fuck Mountain, Doug fucking Glover. I'm here in Glasgow and I have sex sometimes.
Wow, we're straight in with it. There we go. I think this brings me straight onto a question, because I feel like Doug's come in with some kind of confident sex talk. As
I'm just
you
in a
always do,
mood
Mr. Glover.
tonight.
I'm gonna ask you all a question just to get us rolling on this. What does sex mean to you? That I'm not necessarily asking emotionally, although you can answer it in that way, but what is sex? How do you define sex? And I guess we'll unpack more what our relationship is to it, but what is sex to you? Should we go in the same order? Zoe, you're going to kick us off?
God, I'm not the person to kick us off with this topic, but sure. Sex to me, yeah, I am. The G-spot, huh? Sorry. Sex to me, it's an act between two or more people, depending on what you're into. There's different levels of sex. There's casual, there's intimate, there's relationship, there's different types of relationships. Sometimes it's pleasurable for some people, I'm sure. Sometimes it's not. It's a natural thing that we're supposed to do in this world.
Yeah, it's so hard to define, isn't it? I mean,
yeah,
but it's also not.
Yeah, that was me.
Henrietta.
Yeah, that is quite a big question. I think for me, it's something that you explore with another person, and I think sex is what can bring people together, but it's also what can bring people apart. And it's about finding that dynamic. I think sex can be used as a way to show love, but it can also be used as a way to show lust instead. Sex for me is also consent. I think right now, thankfully, a lot of conversation is happening about what sex is and when do you consent to it and when don't you, because there's so many blurry lines that we kind of grown up with that we now need to kind of redefine. So I think sex is also something that needs to be redefined, and we're still trying to find out what that is and what that means.
Oh, I love that. I love that when people come straight in with like, yeah, this is it. You don't need an hour's conversation because this is it. Yeah, absolutely. There's so many points you made there that I want to come back and touch on. But I'm going to go over to Mr. Glover in the corner.
Oh shit, that's me. All right.
You've had all this time, Doug.
God, I wish someone would have told me that was me. 23 years, it's just, but yeah, okay. What is sex? A good time, mostly. Like, honestly, I think it's mainly two or more people just understanding a need and acting on it. I think everything more that can really go into, like your average relationship, I think that's just kind of separate. I think sex is its own thing, and it's something that you do with usually someone you at least somewhat trust.
Yeah, I think points that everyone has made there about trust and consent is where I feel like this conversation has to start. There's no other place that this conversation should ever not start. And I also just want to kind of preface this by saying I feel like we've got a little bit of our hilarity out the way, because sex is an awkward conversation. It is a dangerous dialogue in a way. People feel awkward about it, and I think that's why I've started with the question like, what is sex? What is sex to you? Because we all turn into children suddenly. We kind of giggle a little bit. And I have to admit, for people that are watching this, we've just had 15 minutes together where we kind of giggled and made stupid little jokes at each other. I'm sure you'll hear a lot more of those over the next 50 minutes because they're still humorous. But the reality of it all is that that's like a coping mechanism, isn't it, for awkwardness, the way that we feel about it. So why do we feel awkward about sex? Why do we feel awkward about it?
Just because we're told we should, I think. I don't know who it was that like made that decision, but somewhere along the line, someone just said, "Hey, this basic human thing that most people do at some point, it's wrong, it's horrible,
Right.
and anyone who does it is wrong and horrible." You know?
Yeah, like if you look at it from a historical perspective, then Christianity, especially for this part of the world, was a big influence on why sex suddenly became something that you shouldn't talk about and that you should be ashamed of. Because before Christianity, especially, I'm from Scandinavia, so obviously the Vikings were kind of before Christianity, and sex was something that you would explore in the open. It wasn't something you were at the same time ashamed about as you is now. And yeah, again, Christianity is a big part of that.
Yeah, like speaking of the history of it, that's something that I read a while back that was really the case in like Asian countries and mostly places like Japan, where it was just super open. Like people would walk around outdoors just naked until they started expanding and trading with sort of white Christian nations. And they basically brought the concept of shame to Asia.
Wow.
Yeah, that's your fun fact for the week.
That's some learning for me. Yeah, I guess I think it stems from a place of education, doesn't it? Which is why I've kind of put this consent thing into two parts about why are we so awkward about talking about it. Because in order to consent to something, I think you have to have kind of confidence in it. You have to have faith in it. And if
you have to have knowledge about it.
Right.
If you don't have knowledge about it, then how do you know, like, things as simple as consent? Like, the definition of consent has been changing completely over the years. I mean, it wasn't until the 70s that marital rape was made illegal.
Right.
Consent is a ever-changing thing, and I definitely agree with like the traditional Christian views. Kind of like it. I think it started a lot from there, because you were told no sex before marriage, had to get married, and if you were pregnant, you had to marry that person because you weren't allowed to have sex out of wedlock. And if you had a child out of wedlock, then you were completely screwed. You were completely outcast from society. You were made to feel like a bad, terrible person, like the worst kind. Whereas now we're kind of starting to normalize, the thoughts of casual sex and casual relationships.
Right.
We never had that kind of thing before. So as sex is being redefined, consent is also being redefined.
And I mean, so why is it still so difficult for some people to understand consent? Because it's simple, really, when it comes down to do you agree that this is something that we can do or not?
Because we're not taught about it. Simple as, like, if I go back to my sex education, I was taught how to put a condom on a blue dildo, and I was taught that sometimes people, like, you don't even get, you just get the heteronormative sexual experience in schools. And I think the video that we saw was just, they were at a party and they went into a shed. And they were like, yeah, I'm about to lose my virginity. And that's what happened. Like, I was never taught, this is probably going on to topics that we'll discuss later. I was never taught that women can bleed, that it can be painful sometimes. They didn't really go over consent. It was more, they went more down the line of like drugs and stuff like that. Drugs and alcohol, stay away from that. Here's a little bit about sex and what might happen, but back to drugs and alcohol, because that's the more important thing. So you're not really, I rediscovered consent in the last couple of, I rediscovered consent in the last couple of years and what consent actually meant. And that's me, 25, 26 now. I didn't really understand all the different types of consent and all the different ways you consent and all the different situations where consent was not given, that you didn't realize it was unconsented.
Is consent the same thing to other people, that they're kind of processed understanding that?
Well, like in Denmark, there's a new law now that you haven't given consent unless you actively have said yes. So that means that there shouldn't be now any blurry line. But it's also like, if you have a partner and you've been with this partner for months or years, do you need to ask every time you have sex? Because it's not just black and white. And I think also this misconception that women don't have the same kind of lust as men do. So I think also quite a lot of men experience where they haven't given consent, or where their boundaries have been kind of overstepped, because we grew up with this notion that men always want. So if a woman wants, the man will automatically want to. And like, if I look at how I feel like in episodes that I haven't given consent to something, but also thinking about, when have I actually not received consent for some of the things that I did, because I just had this conception that boys are like this and girls are like that. And I think that is, again, education is a big part of it. Like, I don't remember in school at all talking about like sexual interaction at all. So everything like kind of what you watch on telly, or what you hear something talk about, or like read in like young adult books, but they are not necessarily depicting society and the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. Doug, what's your perspective then as a man? We've just heard about the kind of gender roles that consent has in our heads, at least. How do you feel?
Well, just as you guys were talking, I was sort of thinking if I've had any maybe bad experiences, but I've been really lucky, at least to the best of my knowledge. Like, everything I've ever done has been mutually consensual. I don't ever feel like I've been taken advantage of, and to my knowledge, at least, I've never, done anything without full consent. Obviously, it's a subjective experience. So anyone that I've done anything with, if there wasn't like a verbal yes, let's do this, they could, make the case. But no one has, so I wouldn't, But as far as consent goes, if there's any question in my mind, I just don't, because it's,
and a lot of the time you do get a sense of how the other party is feeling.
Absolutely.
Even if they're not saying it, there are signs. Granted, some people choose to ignore them. Granted, some people cannot pick up on them, but you're most of the time, like, if you're both at it and you're both like really into it, you're gonna know, and you're gonna be able to read the room and be like, yeah, this is like, even if you come up for air and you're like, are we still cool with this? But a lot of the times you do know when you're both mutually really into it. Because I know times where I personally have been super into it and I'm definitely there connecting with a person, and then there's other times I'm just completely disconnected. Like, and it's not a secret, I don't really try to hide it, but a lot of the times, like, either they're choosing not to pick up on it, and I don't feel like I can say, look, I'm done now. Because a lot of the times you feel obligated to it. And I find as well, like, when a female says no, a lot of people take that as a challenge. It's not a definitive no.
No
It's
means convince me.
yeah, no means convince me, exactly. And I've been in that situation myself where I've actually said no repeatedly, and then just kind of given up and been like, okay, I guess I'm not getting out of this, so I might as well, get over and done with, which is not okay.
No.
It's completely not okay. But I have been in situations myself where they've definitely been like, no, and I've in their ears they're hearing convince me rather than, you know what, I'm not in the mood. I just don't want to.
And I think that all stems from why it's so important that you understand what consent is to you and the other person, to the other party, but also why it's so important that we're educated enough to be able to have that conversation about sex and about our relationship to both sex and consent. Because if you feel powerless in that moment, there's sometimes you're like paralyzed verbally. Sometimes you what do? You can't do anything sometimes in that scenario.
Sometimes you don't know what to do in that scenario. Sometimes you don't know until it happens. Wow, this is getting a lot deeper for the beginning of the conversation.
We're 15 minutes in and there we are.
I know. Sometimes you just feel like you kind of have to go along with it and just get over and done with, which is not okay and not where we should be. But a lot of the times in that moment, you get like, you don't know how that person's going to react if you're like, okay, I'm done. So you just kind of go along with it. I wanted to point out the consent is tea video for anyone that's not watched that. There's this video and it's talking about consent and it's using the euphemism of tea and how people may or may not like their tea. So if people haven't seen that video, please check it out. I think it should be shown in all schools.
We will link it in the description after this as well.
Yes.
I think
that's what I'm going to need to see.
I think just to sort of round off consent as a thought, of course, consent can be removed at any time and it can be re-given, I guess, at any time, because within kind of sex, things change, things move, things happen, and it's quite boring otherwise if you kind of stationary on the same thing. So I guess it's about feeling comfortable in that. How do we, as a society, make that a more open conversation where someone during the activity could actually say, do you know what, I don't want to do that, I'm not comfortable with that. Maybe not as blatantly as I've just said, but actually, why not? I completely agree. Like sometimes you just need to be like, hey, I'm not cool with this. Like nowadays, from my experience now, like I will have no problem turning around to someone and saying, hey, I'm not actually good with this. Can we stop? And maybe, and it's the same for men as well. Like if you're not feeling comfortable, because it's not just women that feel uncomfortable. Sometimes the guys, they're just not into it. And this goes for heterosexual relationships, homosexual relationships, any sort of relationships, pansexual, anything like that. If you're in a group session, make sure that you all are on the same level of comfortability. And if you're feeling uncomfortable, speak up. It's okay to speak up, and it's okay to be like, I'm not cool with this. It's okay to speak your mind, and it's okay to step away from the situation. And if you're on the other side and someone's telling you, look, I'm uncomfortable, don't be an arse about it. Don't be like, oh, but come on, I was almost finished, or I was just getting into it, or anything. Like if they say no and they're uncomfortable, just be like, hey, sure, that's perfectly fine. Aftercare the situation. Chill out, hug if you don't want to be touched. Don't do that. Watch a film. Make sure you get comfortable with each other again. And then if anything changes, go into it again. If not, you don't need to. Just don't be an arsehole.
I think because it's like if someone says no and you continue, that's assault. Like it's just basically assault, whether or not you want to. And I think also actually taking away the responsibility for the person that is not feeling comfortable. Be brave enough to ask the person, like, do you want me to do this, or can I do that to you, or do you want to touch me? Be brave enough to ask those questions, because then you will get the answer.
Communication is key.
And if they don't say anything, then that's also a no. Like everything that's not a yes is a no. And I know it's fucking difficult, and I also know from experience that if you are with someone, sometimes you're not in the mood and the other person is, and then they're quite keen, and then time goes by and then you are suddenly keen, and then you want to interact sexually with this person. So like consent, as we also kind of touched upon, can change. Like a no can turn into a yes, but it's also, again, how are you taking that no? If you are obviously respectful of it and you completely like hands off and everything is good, and that might change into a yes at some point, and it might never.
But you've got to let them turn it into a yes. You can't convince them to turn it into a yes.
No,
it's not.
But yeah, again, it's like, it's not just about, because it's so fucking difficult saying no when you are feeling pressured, especially if you have like your story or your background or your traumas. There might be something that makes it really difficult. And also, quite often, you don't want to embarrass the other person. Like, I feel like now I don't mind saying no, but growing up when you're a teenager and you're trying to find yourself and trying to find your boundaries and trying to understand the other person's boundaries, there is this shame that is connected to it. And I think, that is also something kind of need to be aware of, that it's not just about saying yes and no, it's so much bigger than this, which makes it so fucking difficult.
Doug, I just want to give you kind of a moment on that.
I think, in my opinion, it starts and ends with like media, really, because you think about the depiction of both men and women when it comes to especially consent, and it's always been the case in, films, TV shows. The man is out to win the woman every time. Like, for one, super heteronormative, but for two, it's like it puts pressure on both people, because it's as if, for women, they're expected and it's their job to say no until the guy has proven that it's worth saying yes. And so it makes it, I reckon, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think that sounds like it would make it harder for women in real life to want to give consent, and even if they are into it, but also it ridiculously hurts the psyches of like the boys who grew up watching it, where they see that narrative over and over again. It's like, I need to prove myself, I need to win her. So anytime they get a no, they don't take that as no, they take that as you haven't earned it yet. And they will keep trying. So I think thing number one that needs to change is that depiction in films and TV. People need to be shown to be equal partners. Women need to be shown to either want it or not, and for them to be able to change their minds about that at any time.
But also for men, I think also that's what's really important, that it's not just women saying yes and no. I think quite a lot of guys, and sometimes even without them knowing, because they've also grown up in a society that preaches that men always want and they should always go get the girl. But what about the times that a guy actually don't want to have sex? I had an ex-boyfriend. I remember feeling like I wanted sex more than him, and I feel like that was wrong. I was obviously way younger than I am now, but I would chat with my friends about it and be like, it's odd that he's not as sexually kind of active or whatever. He doesn't with me. But like, it's not fucking odd. He's a human being. He's not just entitled to a certain kind of degree of interest in sex just because he's a guy. And same with girls. This idea that we need convincing, because like we don't really have this like sexual lust going for us. And I think like it also comes back to toxic masculinity. It's these ideas that we've been planted since we're young.
Absolutely.
The problem is the narrative. The narrative for everybody needs to change. There's not one person, there's not one gender. Like we haven't touched on like those who are non-binary and don't apply to either or in the opposite end of the gender spectrum. Like they probably have it. They will have a hard time with consent and like fitting into those gender norms or whatever. They're not going to know. But the narrative for all needs to change. There's not just one narrative that needs to change when it comes to sex and when it comes to consent.
100%. And I think it's really nice that everyone's kind of touched upon it there. I think it goes beyond gender, really. It is just about the individual. That's what sex is about. It's about the individuals in whatever scenario that they're in. we've talked so much about education without talking about education. So I want to briefly kind of touch on that. I hated sex education at school with every fiber of my fucking being. It was all just put a condom on a banana, don't get the lady pregnant. And I was like, I'm not gonna get the lady pregnant because I don't want to touch ladies. And there it was. That was my sex education. And I left school being like, oh, all I know about being gay is that I might catch HIV at some point. And that was it. That was the extent of my sex education.
Yes.
And I think there's two things that have changed a lot about sex education, but I still think are so flawed. One is that heteronormative that we've talked about away, that sex is purely between a man and a woman, and the other side of that it's truly for making babies. That is what sex is for. It's like you forget that it's something that can be enjoyed. It's not just about, you know, popping out kids. A scenario that will never happen with me personally, unless there's something that's happening that I just apparently didn't get taught very well in sex ed. But I kind of want other people to speak on that. What was their kind of sex ed experiences at school?
Mine was not paying attention. That's about the size of it. It's because it's like everyone said, you put the condom in the dildo, you say wear one at all times, don't catch anything, don't get them pregnant, and then you get nothing else. It's like, okay, well, person's naked in front of me, what do I do? Like, that's it. Like, you come out of school and it's like, you're just completely unprepared. It's like
think Mean Girls. Think that Mean Girls, you will get pregnant and die. Like, that's how sex education is.
That's to this date, that's still just what it is in any school. That's what you get.
But that comes back to your point earlier, Doug, of like, that's why so many people are influenced by the media and the films and the songs that they listen to.
All they get.
Because sex ed is so limited at school.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Is it the same internationally, like beyond Britain for you, Henrietta?
Well, I have like a fake memory of like one day where we had 1.5 hours with like the school nurses telling us about safe sex. But that's like a whole other issue. Like, as it seems like everywhere, they're not really talking about how sex works. It's mostly just like, don't get pregnant and don't get chlamydia, and then you'll be good to go. But again, it's also like, it's heteronormative. We're not talking about bisexuality or homosexuality or pansexuality or like non-binary gender. It's so we have this idea that sex is between men and women. So what, like, I don't know, like for my sexuality is bisexual, and it wasn't until I was in my 20s I was like, okay, now I'm sure that I'm bisexual, because I never learned anything about it other than from the medias, and the medias are not representative of how society is. It's getting way better, but especially growing up, it was just such a straight world.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, as far as education goes, we all agree that we basically got none. I consider myself super lucky because my first sort of experiences came in the longest term relationship I've ever had. So we had months and months on end to sort of fucking trial and error it mostly, like, because we were already just like, we were in that boat together, you know, we were both like late teens, no idea what we were doing, and we just kind of trial and errored it until we were both just having a good time.
And I love that. Like, sex
Sex
should be trial and error. That is what it is. Like, find what you like and what you enjoy, because nobody gets that first time. I mean, some people do, I'm sure, but I'm sure those people are rare. They are like the golden sex gods. But like, bluntly, it is trial and error, and you kind of have to explore within what your limits and the other person limits are. But I guess being in a committed relationship like you were in that scenario is great. You know, others aren't so lucky. You kind of explore with whatever kind of pops up on the app, etc.
Yeah, that's how I did it.
But it's also like talking about like pleasure. I remember like it wasn't until like years after I started having sex that I learned that I could also come. Whereas that was always something that you expected from guys. Like it was almost like, well, if they don't come, this has not been a successful sex act. But it doesn't matter about female pleasure. And I think also that, like, for example, research shows that women in heterosexual relationships are the ones that are getting fewest orgasms. And females in homosexual relationships, they are the ones that get the most. And bisexuals are the second, probably because they also date men. Because again, we've had this like narrative of, again, it's the men who wants it, and the females are kind of here to provide when we, well, sometimes want to provide, and then if we don't, then convince her, or in other cases, unfortunately, rape or assault.
Yeah. Which is why the education part is so important. That it's because people, when they try and make those new discoveries, get it wrong, because they didn't know those parameters. They didn't know that right and wrong, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I want to get on the topic of female orgasms, Tom. You know that's the topic that I very much want to talk about. Sure. But on the topic of like, on the topic of what Doug was speaking about earlier, like everyone, because we were kind of like talking about like, you know, your first time. I just wanted to, you know, sometimes it's not always in a relationship. Sometimes you're a lot younger than you should be when you first do it. Not hinting at anyone in particular. And you know, it's normal to have pain, as I mentioned earlier. It's normal to bleed for a female, as I mentioned earlier. But let me tell you, when that first time happened, and that all happened to me, I was not prepared for that. And I broke down and I ran out of the guy's house. Right, and I was far too young to be doing anything. I think a lot of educators and a lot of parents don't want to think about the fact that their young teenagers are having sex, but they are.
Yeah,
it happens. It does happen, even if people don't like to admit it. Which is why I think that more education needs to be put out there, because you're not going to prevent them from doing stuff. You're not going to prevent them from exploring. So if you educate them more, they're going to be more prepared on situations that they could face while experimenting.
Exactly. I mean, on that exact front, from when I used to work in drug prevention, the young people that we worked with, it was always the point of the education is not and never say don't do this. You're doing that wrong. This is how to do it right. This is how you should be keeping yourself safe if you're in this scenario. I'm not telling you to do it, but I know you're doing it. So let's realistically talk about how you're going to do this in a more safe environment. And it should be the same about sex. You know, it's really great with stuff like drugs and alcohol. We're a better place being able to educate with them. But you're totally right, Zoe. It's like, let's be realistic. It's sex ed in the UK starts, I think, primary 6, primary 7, or year 6. So what's that, year 5, year 6 in England. It's like that's the right age to grab kids at, because I think, sure, it starts biologically, what that body is and how that all works. But that's the core understanding, I think, of where everything stems from. It is biology at the end of the day. Sorry, Zoe, we wanted to kind of move on to orgasms there, which I think is a whole big worldly topic. I'm going to throw 2 facts, because I can't believe that we're like 35 minutes in and I haven't used my fact iPad today. So on orgasm. Orgasms supposedly improve sperm quality for men, so they're good for you. Orgasms are good for you in just so many ways, because they relieve stress, they help you feel pleasure, of course, but they just help you feel relaxed. It's worth mentioning the average male orgasm lasts 6 seconds and the average female orgasm lasts 20 seconds. So that is quite different. Orgasms are so exciting and so interesting, and it's so mad that I feel weird saying the word orgasm, but there we go. How weird is that?
Naughty. So
I
naughty.
want to say though that whole thing about male orgasms lasting way shorter, I feel like we got the shaft and not even in the fun way.
I love you, Doug. Yeah.
Boom, train derailed. We're on this now.
I was just waiting for I'm waiting for other people to talk before I spill my tea on this topic.
Well, something.
There it is. There's a sex joke. I mean, orgasms, as Henrietta's already pointed out, are not the be-all and end-all of sex, but they can be a considerable part of it. It's not the full stop, though. It's sometimes an exclamation mark, but there can be more to a paragraph after an exclamation mark. But sometimes you don't have exclamation marks in a paragraph. Sometimes they're not there, and that's fine too.
Yeah. So I'm of the actually quite considerable amount of women that have never had an orgasm. Never once. I fake them every time, can't even do them solo. And I think that's not talked about enough. I thought it was very strange. I genuinely feel like all the time that there's something wrong with me because I can't reach that climax that so many people can reach. And every time I tell someone that, they're like, oh my God, you've never experienced that. Oh, you're missing out. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I've not had one to tell you if I have or not. So I just feel like guys, usually it's very easy for them, as far as I'm aware, to reach climax. Some situations it is not. I completely understand that. But compared to women, it's a lot easier for them to reach a climax than it is for a female. Many females cannot orgasm through penetration only. A lot of it is clitoral stimulation. A lot of people don't know where the clitoris is. That's another thing people should be educated on. Just
that should be lesson one. Yeah.
Lesson one. Take a page out of Monica's book. 1 to 7. Seven.
I have no fucking clue what's just happened. I have no idea what
no,
that is.
You need an education in fucking quality television, is what.
All right.
I'm looking at a website here now. I'm not sure how reliable the source is, but a study that this website did called Pleasure Better. They found that 86% of homosexual women usually or always orgasm during partnered sexual activity, compared to just 66% of bisexual women and 65% of heterosexual women. So it seems like the lesbians are having more fun than the rest of us, which is wonderful.
Have fun.
Yeah.
Yes, but I mean, female-wise.
Yeah.
Those of us with a female reproductive system.
All right, I'm gonna do a lot of people a favor here. Right, this is a PSA for any straight men watching. Learn how to eat out. Lesson 1. That's anyone you're with, Wolf.
All the places I thought I was gonna go, Doug.
Yep.
That's a PSA. That's something you need to do. If you can't do it well,
I think you'll find that I'm wonderful at using the Deliveroo app. Thank you very much.
Hey,
good
jokes.
But I think that also is like, now we were talking about delivering. It's but I think it's also important that we are, again, individuals. So something that I like, someone else might not like, and
yes, you have to explore with the partner you have. Not everyone's going to be into the same things. Not everyone's going to have the same kinks.
Yeah. Oh, I swear to God, like, that is, in my personal experience, that is the number one deciding factor between like just good sex for both people and bad sex for both, where no one fucking enjoys it, is like communication. I've been with people who are like goddamn air traffic controllers. Like, they tell you fucking an angle to like a decimal point degree that they want you at, and it's like, if you follow that, you both have an amazing time.
And that's
And
someone
it's like,
that knows their body, which is great.
yeah. And then the opposite of that are like, and these are people who they're not doing anything wrong, but definitely could do with a lot more confidence, where it's the people who just sort of go along with whatever you're doing and they have nothing to say about anything except, consent, let's keep going. And it's like, they're not going to tell you that they're not having a good time, even though it would be so easy and simple to fix if they told you, like, I don't like that, can we do this instead?
I mean, I guess you brought up something that's on my little list of things that I want to go through here. What is good sex? What is bad sex?
Bad sex is just where you never get past the awkwardness of it, and it's just either like mentally, emotionally, often physically, you're just uncomfortable. Like you're not 100% having a good time.
What do other people think?
I think there's also different degrees of bad sex. So I'm really trying to narrow it down to a specific sentence. But I think some really bad sex I had, where I didn't realize it was bad until I kind of took a step back from it. And actually, after we kind of broke up, I realized it wasn't great sex. He was, it felt like it was a performance having sex with him.
Wow.
And I remember in the moment, I was like, oh yeah, like, what he's doing. But then afterwards, I always felt like I'm not connecting with him. I feel like there's something that is blocked somehow. Like I can feel you, but I can't feel you. And I think afterwards, like, no, it's actually really shitty sex, because I like to connect with people, and it might not be like love, but I need that connection. And I think if that connection is not there, then it's bad sex. You can be a fucking stud. You're going to have the perfect triceps and fucking, your stomach is really, I don't know. You're going to have a perfect pair of boobs. But if there's no connection, then it's bad. It's just,
Well, I mean, it's like, if you got one working hand and an internet connection, most people can like get off. It's not that you're really there for if you're making the effort of having sex with a person,
But to that end, if sex has a purpose, so by that I mean all sex is for some reason, but I mean if you're trying to make a baby, because there are people that actually have sex to genuinely procreate, and can the sex, is it bad if you don't have a baby? Is that how it works?
What?
So if you're trying to have sex to procreate, and you've had that sex and there's no baby at the end of it, it didn't work, was that bad sex?
I think that's up to the individual. Sometimes
it's subjective
than the destination,
which is what we're saying about sex for everyone, right? Because I guess that was kind of the answer I was looking for, really, because I think my point is I definitely had sex that I think was quite good, but other people think was quite bad. And I know that through conversations, and that just makes me sound like I'm fucking terrible at sex. But
you are. Been there.
Tom,
No, I'm joking.
All right, fuck you all.
I'll help you figure that out once we go off.
Oh, Doug, that's very kind. Wonderful. There's my Valentine's Day offer. But I mean, realistically,
I think it's a lot to do with where you are mentally. It's a lot to do with how you're feeling at the time, who the person is. It's a very subjective situation. Sometimes the foreplay can be fantastic, but the penetrative area is not good. Sometimes it's the opposite. A lot of the times it's your reasoning for having sex. I know many times I've had sex to fill a void, and it's meant absolutely nothing. And I felt like, I felt it, but inside I felt like just numb. So I think a lot of it, good sex is healthy sex. Healthy sex, being mentally healthy, being physically healthy, being emotionally healthy. And that can be under casual relationship, anything like that. It has to be healthy for both parties or all parties, depending on, what type of sex you're having. But once it starts to verge on that unhealthy into sex can actually be a form of self-harm. I don't know if anyone was aware of that, but sex is, especially unprotected sex. If you're having constant unprotected sex for no reason and you don't understand why you're kind of doing it and you just seem to be doing it, it does verge on becoming self-harm because it is a dangerous act that causes harm to the person. So it always needs to be on the healthy side if it's going to be good sex.
Yeah, can I add something to that? Because I think that is something that is also really important, is that sometimes you actually consent to having sex with someone, but you don't actually want to. And it's not because they are necessarily doing anything wrong, but I definitely done the same, felt like some kind of void, or I felt like it was, for me, I had this idea that I'm independent, and an independent woman can have sex with as many people she wants. But it was kind of like creating a narrative that wasn't really real, because I was doing something that wasn't healthy for my mental state.
Right.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of women, it's something we don't talk about. Like I've written a spoken word piece. I'm actually performing it in 2 days at events, and it kind of touches upon this and why we tend to do it. And after I shared it with a few friends, they start to open up about stories where they're kind of done the same. And I think a lot of people kind of almost like abuse their own bodies, in a sense, use sex as a way, again, of numbing, or because they think that's what they deserve. Or again, this is our role. My role is to please other people, so therefore I have to do this. And I think that is knowing that you're not alone in this, because I thought I was alone here, and I'm not.
And once you go through like that kind of stage in life, because many people go through it, and that's women, men, non-binary, everything in the gender spectrum, we all go a lot of us go through a certain stage where known as a whole stage. I'm sure a few of us have been through that. Some people, it's healthy, it's character building, it's just because they wanted to, and other people, it's literally to fill a void that they don't understand what's happening in their lives. Something isn't quite right, so they're doing it because they don't know what else to do, and they feel like this is the only path they can take. And like you said, Henrietta, like it's a lot to do with self-worth and what you feel like you deserve. But the problem is with women, we then get that slut narrative attached to us if that's what we're doing. Whereas with men, they don't tend to get the same labels put upon them if they're going through that sort of stage.
Yeah, I absolutely want to, Doug, I promise I'll come to you just a sec. I absolutely want to round up that last thought before we move on to the next one. The sex, absolutely, there is negative sides to it, that it can be used as a weapon, and whether it's a weapon against oneself or against others, there's plenty of things to discuss in that. Some people use STIs literally as a sort of like biological weapon.
Biological warfare, yeah.
Right, exactly. And it's rarer, but it does happen. And again, that comes down to the education that we've got. Yes, Doug, I promise I'm coming to you now. That kind of idea of the narrative that we get from all these films and things where it's like, oh, whoa, that guy, he sleeps with so many people, he's a hero, whoa. And then it's like, oh, if you
such a lad, he's such a lad.
And it's like, why?
No, what a lad. He's a lad. Yes. What an absolute lad.
Does that still exist? Do people feel like we've moved beyond that, or is that still very much a thing? Go on, Doug. I promised I'd come back.
Not trying to blow my own horn. I've been around in the past, and I find that depending who you're talking to, there are two completely different narratives that people get about you. And I've had both. I've had people see me both ways, where it's like, yeah, some people, mostly other, men, mostly straight men, they hear that you've, had a fair bit of sex with, a few different people. And yeah, they do get that assumption of, oh, look at, Mr. Big over there, it's like, he gets around, he's such a, he's a top lad. not always, they assume an attitude of you that maybe you don't have. And again, that comes back to the media. They think of people like, Barney Stinson from How I Met Your Mother,
Right.
Those kind of guys who are just always going for it. It's like no emotion, no attachment. They just want to get as many bodies as possible. Not the case. I mean, a lot of people, it's I don't know if it's a healthy attitude, because again, we only know our own experiences. But I know that speaking to my own experience, it's a case of, even if it's short or like surface level, it's always got to be someone you have some kind of connection with. Someone that you get along with, someone that you think, hey, let's do this fun thing together. And then it's easy for, people on the outside to think, someone's being used there. Because it's just a foreign concept to people that like any two or more, people can just enjoy a time together. I don't know if any of that made any sense.
It did. I think you spiraled in a beautiful way. Go on.
I have to say I disagree. I have to say that I disagree slightly with the connection situation. I don't think there always has to be any sort of connection. This is just speaking from personal experience. I can understand where you were coming from. That would be wonderful if I had a connection with every person that I slept with. I slept with a guy because I needed a place to stay one night. Done those sort of things, like there was no connection there. It was literally, it was for a reason.
Yeah.
But there's been times where I've had absolutely no connection with a person whatsoever. In fact, more times than times I had, if I were to count them, that it was literally just surface level, nothing to it. But that's again in a time where I was personally very numb and just very numb to everything, which Tom knows a lot about. Not being numb knows a lot about, like, no, I mean that I meant that you knew me during that time.
Oh, I know.
I was during that time. Yeah, I mean, yeah, totally. But yes, I don't always think that there needs to be a connection, but I'm not saying that that is a healthy way to go about it.
Yeah.
It's better if there's a connection. Sex is always better if there is a connection with the person. 100% I agree with that sentiment, but I don't always think there is a connection.
I don't know if I worded that well. I didn't mean that there has
to
be.
I knew where you were going, but yeah, I just wanted to pop that in there.
I think I'm keen, because we're sort of talking about it, to think about like why we have sex, because obviously this is part of the reason we're doing this conversation now. This week has been Valentine's Day, and we think of sex as a relationship romantic-y thing. We've talked about it a little bit, but like casual sex is very valid, and it happens to a lot of people. And I don't know, is that connection always there when it comes to sex like that? Is sex still there in relationships that have been going for 40 years? The answer to all of these questions is yes and no. But I mean, I feel like I want people to think about sex as something beyond two people in a room who are in a relationship. Yeah, two people, doing whatever that was, Zoe. Yeah.
Well, that was, as talking to your thing about, expanding the view of casual sex. And I would say that when I talk about, having a connection, the first one night stand I ever had, just met this, woman in a club, and we just went home. And I would say that there was a connection there, because we did talk for a bit beforehand, and it's like I can't speak to her experience or her reasoning, but for me it's like there was the level of maybe trust that you might have in a stranger. It's like I wouldn't just let anyone into my home. It's like I would always want to make sure that I at least get along with the person. I have some basic tiny idea what they're about. And it's really just the reasoning is, it's like you want physical closeness with someone. It's not about the destination, like we've said repeatedly through this. It's about, just a couple of hours that you have with someone.
Hours? Fucking hell, Doug! Whatever.
There's a lot included, before and after. Like, it's. And in my experience, like, whenever I would call it good, there's obviously you account foreplay, aftercare, and even like before and after. Even that, you spend time with the person. You talk things through with them. You make sure that you're on the same sort of wavelength. And if
I have to say that I feel like that's great. That is great. Yeah. But it sounds like really a romanticized version of sex.
Yeah, and it's something that a lot of people just don't do. They skip over all of that. They want to get in and out, and that's, more power to them. But to me, that's just never what it's been about.
I can't stop laughing at the in and out, but yes.
Yeah, me too.
In and out, and in.
I've had a few of those.
And in, and out.
I've had just a few of the in and outs, and that, yeah.
But does anyone else want to speak to that? I can say with complete certainty, sometimes 2 hours with some aftercare and a bit of cuddling and foreplay is certainly not how it's played out.
Oh yeah, no, that's definitely a best case scenario. That's not always, yeah.
There is no one reason as to why we have sex. There are many different reasons, different values that we have, different things that we want out of a sexual relationship. So you cannot pinpoint it to one thing. Yeah. Some people just want a casual relationship. Like, personally, I don't want a relationship. I want all the perks of a relationship without the actual commitment and without the actual annoyance of another person all the time.
That is Brexit in a nutshell, what you've just described. But anyway.
Yeah.
Everyone.
Yeah, so it depends. It's a very subjective thing. It's a very subjective reasoning as to why we have sex. For me personally, well, to be fair, I haven't had sex in a year and a half, so I don't have it. So I can't say why we. No, it's okay. I've gone longer. So I can't say why I have sex when I'm not. Thing that we haven't touched on, however, is masturbation. Solo. I can say I do a lot of that, and I watch a lot of porn. So that helps.
Also, both of you to say we haven't touched on it. I've been touching on it this whole time. I'm sorry. No, I haven't. Hands are here.
It's the glasses, wasn't it?
I guess
I was talking about Tom, but you and me can talk after this.
That's very kind. It's a big open session. I do kind of want to start to think about rounding things up, but I do want to, because it's the last thing that's on my notes, talking about exactly what you've just talked about, Zoe, which is because we have such a fascination with sex beyond being with a specific partner and that actual activity, like masturbation and playing with oneself is, I guess, for a lot of people, sex. And I think our definition of sex is so penetrative. I'm saying it. It's so like, to have sex, one person must penetrate another, and I don't think that's true. I'm not saying that you can count masturbating as sex. Maybe you do. It's a sexual act. But I guess I'm saying for other people, at least in the gay community, we have sides who don't like being or penetrating themselves. So I don't know. I think I'm kind of saying a very open-ended thought that I'm interested in other people's thoughts on. Is sex simply the eat out to help out that Doug mentioned earlier, and then ramming it in somewhere? Is it that?
No,
absolutely not.
Definitely not. Otherwise, like, the whole lesbian community, then they wouldn't have sex.
Oh, they just don't exist. Lesbians,
exactly.
We all know this.
Yeah, because then
what you're talking about is penetration. You're not talking about sex. You're just talking about a part of sex.
That's the thing. It's like we have a specific word for penetration, and it isn't spelled sex.
Right. But oral sex is still sex because it says oral sex in the title.
Right. Yeah. There.
It is. And I think also, like, obviously it can change because, like, your definition of sex is, Tom, most likely different from my definition of sex.
Right.
So therefore, like, the way I have sex, you probably wouldn't say, oh, I just had sex, because you wouldn't do the same things.
Right.
But yeah, and for some, they define sex as penetration, and okay, good on them. But I don't think it as square as saying that there is like, this is where sex starts and this is where it stops. I think that's also a fluent thing.
And I think that's why we need to have conversations about it. Hence why we just have. That was such a wonderful. Oh wow, that was so planned.
Would you call it a conversation or possibly a dialogue?
Some could say, but a dialogue implies two, because it comes from the Greek dia. No, it doesn't matter. Anyway,
well then, what are we doing here? What you named it? You named this.
I actually didn't name it. But anyway, it was brainstormed in a team meeting a few years ago. That's not important. But anyway.
Really fucked it up. I was trying to help you out. I was trying to do
I'm sorry.
Trying to push the product, Tom.
Cool. Just before we round up, I strongly encourage all the wonderful people that have come in and out and watched this tonight to go and have your own conversation about sex. If you're scared and you have reservations about that conversation, it's because there's either someone or something that's stopping you from having it. I will just say this. I guarantee you there was at least 3 of our mums that were watching this tonight. And we still had this conversation, knowing that Doug's mom and Zoe's and Helen was watching, probably my mom as well. But you know,
yeah, my mom hears about my sex life all the time. We used to, like, if we knew each other were getting laid, we'd get condoms for each other and all that. Like, it's not weird with me and my mom. Like, if she's getting laid, go girl. Oh, she's got to hate me for just telling that.
Oh, I love that.
She told me not to speak about her this time.
Go on, Helen. Anyway, I just want to quickly come back to everyone before we finish. Can you give me a rounding up sort of thought? What are you going to take away from our dialogue about sex?
Really, it's communication, 100%. This more than anything, I reckon has showed, definitely me, hopefully whoever's watching, everyone has different ideas about everything, and if you don't talk about it, you're never gonna know, and you're gonna fuck something up. That's just gonna happen.
Literally, yeah.
You're gonna fuck something.
You're gonna fuck something up. Nice.
I haven't fucked something in a while. Let's not go there.
Zoe.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to take away from this is the key to a healthy sex life is to communicate. Is to talk about things. Without talking about things, can't be healthy. If you keep things bottled up and you're not being upfront about them, you know, that's when it leads to trauma. That's when it leads to bad experiences. So find ways that you're comfortable to communicate your wants and your needs during your sexual relationships.
Henrietta.
Yeah, communication, consent, also getting like a healthy relationship with your own body and getting a healthy relationship with sex. Like, it's okay to take a break from sex to kind of reconnect with yourself and see if you are on the path that you want to be on or change. It's okay to, one thing I will say, it's fucking okay to change your mind, even though the guy or the girl is in the bedroom. It's okay to say, no, actually, I need you to leave. Not because of you, not because you've done anything wrong, not because you're a bad person, not because you are stepping any boundaries, but because this is not what I want anymore. Yeah. And I think if I were 10 years younger and someone would have told me that possibly a million times, I would have made better choices for myself. So hopefully someone else will make some better.
Even if you're halfway through it, if you're over it, you're over it.
Yeah.
You can change your mind.
One person's halfway through is another person's done. That sounded profound. Well done, Tom. Yeah, I guess for me, it's sort of a mix of all of that about our relationship to sex. Primarily, I feel like I just want education to be better. And I think that does start
For
with
sure.
all of us. We can't put all of that onto a school and a terrible education system that's handed to some of these schools. I think these conversations and what we've just done shouldn't be a thing on a random Sunday night consistently. It needs to be something that we just openly talk about and kind of comfortably talk about. And I feel like, particularly if everyone had the relationship like Zoe and her mother do that we've just talked about, where you would openly have a conversation about sex, I think we'd all be a lot
Yeah.
sexually healthier, actually. So I guess that's my takeaway. Thank you so much for everyone that's joined us tonight, and to all these lovely people here, to Henrietta, to Zoe, to Doug. Thank you so much. All the wonderful people watching, and if you're watching this on catch up, thank you. I really quickly want to throw back to Henrietta just to shout out her show that she's doing. Tell us where and when we can find all the wonderful details.
So this is at the Golden Goose Theatre on Tuesday. It's a scratch night, so I'm only doing like a 6-minute performance, but I'm going to be amongst a lot of really great people, and the theme is, I think, revolution. So that's that.
Nice.
But yeah, grab a ticket. It's going to be good. I'm there, so it's going to be at least.
I love it. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a lovely Sunday night, and we'll see you next week. Bye.